Hi there YouTubers, welcome to my channel 3D Corners. In today's episode we're going to talk about the interface of 3D Studio Max. It doesn't matter which version of 3D Studio Max you have, because in the last 10 years or so 3D Studio Max interface stayed the same. They changed the icons a little bit at one moment, but more or less 3D Studio Max is the same. So if you are new here on this channel, please don't forget to subscribe. Click that like button and follow me. We have a lot of things to discuss. Okay, so let's start with 3D Studio Max. 3D Studio Max 2021. Okay, so when you start the program, this is what you're gonna get. I know it looks a little bit terrifying in the beginning because it has so many buttons and so many viewports and so many options everywhere. But don't worry, I will explain you everything, so you don't need to worry about anything. The first and the most important thing is the menu. This is the menu. Here you're going to have all the buttons to create a file, to reset your file, to open a file, to save your file, to import, export, reference, and so on. Buttons to edit your file or your objects, to move them, to delete them, to scale them, to place them, and so on. Then these are going to be your tools, your groups of objects, your views, and the create buttons, the modifier button, animation, graphs, rendering when you need to render your project, where you customize your program, scripting, interactive, content, Arnold, which is the default render engine, and the help button. The help button is very important because here you can learn by yourself how to use the program. So for example, if I choose the Autodesk 3D Studio Max help button, it's gonna go to the website help page. Yeah, this is very helpful. This is how I actually learned 3D Studio Max 20 years ago. We didn't have the internet back then, but the help button was actually integrated in the program. So if you really want to learn everything in this program, this is the best way to do it. Okay, I'm gonna close this for now. And now we're gonna go to the program. So as I said, this is the menu button. Then underneath this very long with many small buttons is called the toolbar. I'm not gonna tell you yet everything about the toolbar, because if I'm gonna explain you actually everything about the toolbar, every button from here, but first we need to create an object so I can explain you how to use all of these buttons. So this is the second one here underneath is called the ribbon. We're not gonna use the ribbon for now because this is quite advanced, but later on I'm gonna explain you how we can use the ribbon. The next and the most important part are the viewports. These are the viewports. If you click on them, you're gonna just work from that viewport. Also here you can customize them, you can maximize a viewport with Alt W, as you can see here, maximize Alt W. So if I click Alt W, I'm just gonna maximize that viewport. Also if I click here and I do that, I maximize that viewport. The button for Alt W, it's the last button here on the corner. If I click on this button, it's doing exactly the same thing. So even though I can use this button or I can use the keyboard shortcut with Alt W, it's exactly the same thing. Then for each viewport, you can change the view of that viewport. So for example, this is the top viewport, and you can go here and say, I would like to see this from the perspective viewport, or I would like to go and see the orthographic, or I would like to see everything from bottom, or from back, or from left, or from front, or so on. Also, if we want to change the way that the viewports are displayed on our program, we can go here on this button, actually this one, on this button, and you can have only one viewport which in this case is called top viewport. We can change the perspective if we want, or we can change this to back or so on. Or you can go here and have a different layout, like this one, for example, where you have top, front, and left viewport. Or you can go and change to anything else that you would like to have. So here it's gonna save all your viewports. This is called viewport layout tabs. So I will go back to the default one, which is this. The default one has 4 viewports, 4 views. Yeah, so I'm in the viewport. I'm in the default viewport. Okay, now we're gonna talk about the command panel, which is this one. If I click, it's called command panel. If I hide it, I can bring it back from here. So this is the command panel. You can hide it from here. You right click on it and now it's hidden. And if you go to customize, show UE command panel, and it's gonna pop up back from here from the right side. This command panel, you can extend it. You can even take it from here and move it wherever you want. If you have 2 monitors, you can move it to the second monitor, or you can move it here on the left side. So 3D Studio Max is very customizable. If you want to put it back where it was originally, you can close it and bring it back from the customize button, as I showed you earlier, or you can just go here and say dock to the right side, and it's just gonna dock there. Otherwise, you can go here, dock to the left side, and it's just gonna move on the left side. So dock to the right to have it in the original position. And now the command panel has 6 different tabs. The tabs are these ones. So before I move forward, I just want to show you, if you roll over or anything in 3D Studio Max, it's going to tell you the name of that thing or the button. So in this case, this first tab, it's called create. The second tab, it's called modify. The next one is hierarchy, and the next one is motion, display, and utilities. So these are the main tabs for the command panel. Each tab, in this case the create tab, has different sub-menus. In this case are these small buttons. The first one is called geometry, the second one is called shapes, lights, cameras, helpers, space warps, and systems. Then each of these buttons, which are here, as you can see, everyone has a logo telling you exactly what's inside. For example, this is a small camera, this is a bulb, so a light. In this case, this is a sphere, so a piece of geometry, and this is a shape, so a 2D geometry, and so on. The first one, which is the geometry, has sub-menu, which are these ones. So in the create button, geometry, we are on standard geometry, which is all of these are geometries. Then if I go inside and set extended primitives, I go and see other geometries. Then if I go inside and go to, for example, to stairs, I'm gonna have here stairs. So I'm just gonna go back to geometry, standard primitives, and I'm gonna create my first geometry, which is, I'm gonna choose a box. So for creating an object in the 3D Studio Max, you just click on the box. I'm just gonna use my left click button from the mouse and click on the grid, move it on the diagonal, release the button, and now if I move to the height of the button, it's gonna create the box. At the end, the button is still clicked, yeah? So if I do this again, it's gonna create another one. The button is still there. If I do this again, it's gonna create another one box, another box, another box, and so on. So to stop all of this, I need to click on the right click of the mouse. I did that, now it's deselected. Now I can't create anything anymore. Yeah? So let's start all over again. So to select any of these objects, I'm just gonna go to my toolbar, and now I'm gonna see how to use the toolbar, and I'm gonna use this button, select object. So I'm gonna click on this. It's already selected. And then I can click with left mouse button any of these objects. If I want to delete all of these objects, I'm just click on it and push the delete button from the keyboard. Click, select, delete, select, delete, select, delete. So now I'm going to create again a sphere in this case. So I'm going to click with the left mouse button. I'm going to move the mouse in any direction because it's going to create. As you can see here on the radius on the right side, it's creating the radius of the sphere. I'm going to release the button and I have the sphere. If the button is still on, as you can see here, the sphere is still on, so I can create as many spheres as I want. Now I'm gonna select all of them and I'm gonna push the delete button. Okay, now we know how to create a piece of geometry, which is very, very good. But how can I move around this geometry? Well, for this, we're gonna use all of these small buttons here on the lower interface. So all of this part here is called the lower interface. The part until here, all the left side until here, is used for animation. Also, this small part here determines the coordinates of the object. So for example, I select this object, I delete it. As you can see here in the middle, so now I'm gonna go to this viewport and I'm gonna maximize this with Alt W, yeah. And as you can see in this viewport, now we're gonna learn how to move inside the viewport. So first of all, if you want to orbit inside of this viewport, you just click on this button, which is the orbit button, and it's gonna open this circle, which means that if I'm inside the circle with the left click button pushed, I can move around and I can turn around. I can orbit around, actually. I can orbit to see my object. If I use the hand, which is this button here, it's called the pan view. With the left button clicked, I can pan. So for example, if I create an object again, and I use the pan view, I can pan inside. If I use the orbit, I can orbit around the object. It is very important to stay inside of the circle. So for example, if I stay inside of the circle, I'm orbiting inside around the object, but if I'm going outside of the circle, I'm gonna turn the whole scene. This is very important because many people don't really understand how is this actually working. So it's very important to stay inside of the circle when you try to orbit in 3D Studio Max. Otherwise, you're just gonna turn, you're gonna revolve the scene actually. Okay, let's move forward with the next button. This is called field of view. What does this means? It means that the field of view is becoming bigger or smaller. So if I move like this, this is a low field of view, like 20 millimeters, 30 millimeters, 15, and so on. If I move forward with the left click pushed, I move and I get like 90, 120, 300, and so on. I'm gonna explain you more about the lenses and the field of view in a different lesson. Then we have another button here, which is called the zoom button. Also, with the left click button pushed, you can zoom in or zoom out. If I make a selection here, I click on the dark side of the viewport. Now I deselected the box. So for example, if you use your scroll, you can zoom out with your scroll or zoom in with your scroll. If you make a selection, you can zoom in or zoom out on that selection. So if I don't select anything, for example, I click here on the left side and I deselect the object, and it's gonna do the zoom from that part. See, wherever I have the mouse cursor, it's gonna do the zoom in and zoom out. I'm using my scroll button from my mouse. It's gonna do the zoom in and zoom out from there. If I select the object and I use the zoom button, which is also the same thing as the scroll, it's gonna do the zoom in and zoom out on the selection. So for example, I create another object somewhere around here, and is doing now the zoom in and the zoom out on that selection. If I'm doing another one here, it's gonna do the zoom in and zoom out because this object is selected from that place. Okay, now I'm gonna select all of them and delete them. If you push the Z button, it's just gonna go by the default position of the perspective view. So I'm going out, I'm here, I'm lost, I can't see anything, I just push the Z button and it's going back to the original position. Then we have the zoom all button, which is doing a zoom for all the objects. For example, if I create now a couple of objects in here in different positions, even though this one is selected right now and I'm using this zoom button, it's doing a zoom for everything. Right click to undo the selection. And then zoom extend and zoom extends all selected. So these are all zoom in and zoom out. You can also use the scroll, right? This is the most important thing. And another thing for the pan, which is this one, the button, you can also use push the scroll button and you're just gonna pan. So that is the shortcut. And if you want to rotate, you use the Alt button pushed and the middle button, and now you're just gonna rotate. So most of the time I'm not using these buttons, I'm using the Alt button and the middle button to rotate everywhere. Okay, I'm selecting everything again. Selection is always on, most of the time is on. I'm pushing the delete button and I delete everything, the Z button, and it's going to the default position. One thing that I didn't talk about it's the grid. This square here, it's called the grid. As you can see, the grid is divided by lines, and on the intersection of the lines, these are points. So this is one point, this is another point, this is another point, and so on. And in the middle, we have two dark lines which are intersected, and this is the middle point of the scene. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means that when I'm here, the coordinates of this point are 0, 0, 0. So, for example, when you create an object, you create the object in 3 different coordinates. So I created an object, I have the object here. I do a right click on the object, and this is the menu, the right click menu of 3D Studio Max. So if I click here, as you can see, the menu. And now I make a selection of the object, and I'm going here, and I select move. When I'm doing that, so you can do that by 2 different things. By using this button here, which is the move button, it has these arrows on it. And in the moment I did that, this little thing here, which is called the pivot, it's gonna pop up. We can make the pivot bigger with the plus and minus buttons on the keyboard. So this is the pivot. This is very, very important because this is how you move your objects in 3D Studio Max. So for example, I'm selecting the object, yeah, from left side upper part to the right side lower part, and the pivot is going to show up because I pushed already the button of the move. I can push the button here, or I can go right click and say move. It's exactly the same thing. So right now I can move this object. How can I do that? Is by selecting the axis of the pivot. So for example, now if I move over with my mouse on the OY axis, it's gonna get yellow. This means I can move the object on this axis. If I right click, so right now I'm moving the object with the left mouse button pushed. If I right click, it's gonna move back to the original position. Now I can move it again, and I push the right click button, it's always going back. So this is like an undo button, but in real time. If I go on the X axis and I move it, now the object is moving on the OX axis. If I right click again, it's gonna stop. If I'm going to the OZ axis, it's just gonna go on the OX axis. As you can see, every time when I'm doing this, here on the lower part, when I'm moving the X axis, the numbers are always changing. This means that if I'm going on the upper part of the origin, which is this small intersection here, I'm gonna get positive numbers. If I go under that, I'm gonna get negative numbers. And now, as you can see, when you go with the mouse over all of these axes, you can also go in between. This means that the object is gonna move in both of the axes, also on Y and also on X in the same time. So this means I can move it in that direction, there, here, anywhere that I want. Then if I go on the Z and Y, it's gonna go on diagonal. I'm gonna make this smaller so you can see also the other viewports, so you understand exactly how the movement is happening. So I'm clicking again the object, I'm on OX, I'm in the middle of Y and Z, and I'm moving this. As you can see, it's moving also on the other ones, the other viewports. If I right click on it and I go on Y and X, it's gonna move. In the top view, it's moving like this. And so now I'm going to start to show you how to use all of these buttons. Now I'm going to explain you the buttons from the toolbar, which is the most important bar. So the first two buttons are undo and redo. What does it mean? If I click on undo, it's gonna undo what I did. So for example, I'm gonna create another box from scratch. I'm gonna hit the Z button and I'm creating a box again. Right click, I had a box, and now I'm not really happy with this, and I can delete it by selecting it and pushing the delete button, or I can just go undo button or redo button. So in this way, it's like going back in time and coming back on the present time. So for example, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to create a couple of boxes. So every time when I'm creating a new object, 3D Studio Max is recording that movement and is creating an undo button. So an undo movement. So now if I start clicking on the undo, it's gonna start deleting, actually not deleting, uncreating the objects that I already created. So now if I want to bring them back, I can just go to the redo button and they're gonna pop up back. This is very important because most of the time when we're gonna create objects, and sometimes you realize that you created the object in the wrong position and you wanted to delete it, you can just use these two buttons for that. Now we're gonna go to select and link and unlink buttons. This is a little bit advanced for this moment, but I'm going to show you very, very fast exactly what they're doing. If I'm creating the two objects, and I'm using the select and link button, selecting the first one, and then I go to the second one. As you can see, it's becoming, it has an outline, a yellow outline after I'm going over. Now they are linked. Now these two objects are linked. What that means? It means that if I'm using the move button for this one, it's going to move only that one. But if I'm selecting the move button for the second one, it's going to move both of them. So now these two objects are linked, but it's a link selection only from the second object. For now, this is not very important, but later on we're gonna do these kind of selections and linked selections. The next button is the unlink selection, which is just gonna unlink the selection that we had. So now, as you can see, the two objects are unlinked. Let's select both of them and delete. Okay, so let's move. The next part is beam to space warp. This is most of the time used for animation, so we're gonna skip this one. Then we have this menu, which has geometry, shapes, lives, camera, helpers, warps, and so on. This is used for selection. So all of these here are all these buttons are used for the selection. So for example, if you select geometry and you have a lot of geometry in the scene, when you're going to do the selection, it's going to select only the geometry from the scene. I'm going to create one, a super fast one, to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Then I'm going to create some shapes also. Some circles here and there. And then I will create some lights. Okay. I'm going to add all these lights everywhere. So now let me show you. I'm going to select here geometry. I'm going to make selections. And with Alt Q, I'm going to isolate that. Right click and hide all. So I'm going to it's selecting only the geometry from the scene. As you can see here, I can isolate the selection with this button or Alt Q. And it's isolating only the geometry. Then if I select shapes and I use Alt Q again, it's gonna isolate only the shapes. The shapes are all here. So these are only the shapes. Right click, unhide all. And now if I go to lights and select the lights, it's going to select only the lights of the scene. Even though I'm selecting everything, it's selecting only the lights. Okay, now let's move forward. This is the select object. So I can select objects. Oh, let me go to all. So I can select. Oh, I can select objects, or I can select anything in this scene. Also the lights, also the shapes, light, shape, geometry, geometry, light. Then the next button is select by name, which is kind of similar with this one, which is called Scene Explorer. So this is a Scene Explorer, which most of the time I'm closing this and I'm just using this one with the H. So I'm pushing H and it's showing this one. As you can see, it's kind of similar. It has these buttons on the side, this has these buttons here. It's exactly the same actually. So if I'm choosing to close this one, Scene Explorer default, and then I'm going and click this, I'm gonna have exactly the same one, but I have more space on the viewport to work with. So yeah, as you can see, these buttons, all these buttons here are exactly these buttons here. So for example, if you want to see only your geometry from the scene, you click the first one and it's going to display only the geometries, which are all these boxes. If I double click on one of these, it's going to select it here. If I'm going H again and I'm selecting another box, which is this one, it's selected here with Alt Q, unhide. So yeah, this is used for when you have big scenes, for example, and you want to find an object, or you can find it here. Also, something that I forgot, or no, I didn't forget, but we are not there yet, is, for example, when you select one object and you go to the modify, you can actually put a name for this object. So for example, this is a green box. I will just say green box. In this way, when I'm gonna choose the H button, I know there is a green box here and I can find that green box and I select it. So this is how you can actually use this. The next one is rectangular selection region. So when we make a selection, as you can see, it's a rectangular selection. And sometimes you don't want to do a rectangular selection. So if I click and keep the left mouse button clicked, I'm going to see that I can do different types of selections. So for example, I'm going to choose the circle and now I can do a circle. This is working from the middle of the circle, and it's gonna, everything that is inside of the circle